Again, after listening to all the testimony in the trial, the jury found that Spotlight magazine did not slander Hunt when Spotlight printed an article saying that Hunt had murdered John Kennedy. But Hunt did not have the ability to steal the body from the Dallas coroner, or to steal it again from the Secret Service, and remove it from its coffin and mutilate it and then return it without attracting public attention. And he didn't have the ability to get all the media to lie about it.
The single bullet theory remains intact
For the next 40 years.
What we will do tonight is demonstrate that those theories are wrong.
The theft of the body, for example, could only have been carried out by the most powerful devils in the world, devils so powerful we would recognize their names if we heard them. Can we connect Hunt to any major league devils? Former President Richard Nixon might be a good place to start. Even though he's not generally regarded as an expert at handling guns, he is portrayed in popular American culture as being a slave to the devil. Richard Nixon chose E. Howard Hunt to lead his private White House goon squad, the so-called Plumbers Unit. Hunt became famous as the head of the Watergate burglars. But after his arrest for breaking into the Watergate Hotel while he was sitting in jail, Hunt suddenly began sending messages to Nixon that he needed $2 million to keep his mouth shut. At the same time, Hunt started talking to reporters, saying that he was a CIA assassin. To the thousands of people who believed that the CIA had killed Kennedy, this was earth-shaking news. Hunt was threatening to tell about the Kennedy assassination if Nixon didn't get him the hell out of jail and get him $2 million. Nixon called up the FBI and told them they had to stop investigating Hunt's activities in Mexico. He said the FBI investigation would threaten to uncover the whole Bay of Pigs thing. The whole Bay of Pigs thing? What's that supposed to mean? Bob Haldeman was Nixon's chief of staff and closest advisor. Haldeman says, it seems that in all those references to the Bay of Pigs, he was actually referring to the Kennedy assassination. Nixon was forced to resign based upon the single charge that he tried to stop the FBI from investigating Hunt. And according to Haldeman, Nixon told the FBI that investigating Hunt would uncover the whole Kennedy assassination thing. But how did Nixon know that Hunt was involved? And if he did know, why did he hire him? And why should Nixon care what Hunt said or what the FBI found out about the Kennedy assassination unless he was involved? Was Nixon involved in the Kennedy assassination? One of the most stunning revelations to be uncovered about Nixon recently is this little gem. It seems that Jack Ruby, the mafia thug who shot Oswald, who was spotted by a Dallas reporter in Parkland Hospital in the area where the magic bullet was found on the wrong stretcher, was working for Congressman Richard Nixon in 1947. Nixon admits that he was in Dallas the day that Kennedy was murdered. Well, actually, he forgot that he was in Dallas the first time he was asked about it by the FBI, but they reminded him, and then he admitted that he was in Dallas. So what? So what is that, just as with September 11th, everyone who was alive has a vivid memory of where they were and what they were doing the moment they heard the news. You remember where you were the moment you first heard the news that the World Trade Center had come down. And everyone, even little kids like I was at the time, have a clear recollection of where we were when we heard the news that the president had been shot. Well, almost everyone remembers. It seems that Nixon, like Hunt, can't remember what he was doing on the day that Kennedy was murdered. You see, in 1964 he told Reader's Digest,
I boarded a plane from Dallas to New York. I hailed a cab. We were waiting for the light to change when a man ran over from the street corner and said that the president had just been shot in Dallas. This is the way I heard the news.
However, exactly 9 years later he told Esquire magazine,
On arrival in New York, we caught a cab and headed for the city. A woman came out of her house screaming and crying. She told us that John Kennedy had just been shot in Dallas.
Why does Nixon remember two different versions of how he found out that Kennedy was dead? Perhaps, like Hunt, he can't tell the truth about where he was and what he was doing. And we may never get a clear picture of his activities that day, but it is clear that he had a close relationship with another suspect in this case. As president, he shocked political observers by bringing in a Democrat to be his Secretary of the Treasury. the Texas Democrat who was sitting in front of Kennedy when his brains were blown out, who sat holding his Stetson, looking calmly forward, pretending that nothing was going on, when he says that he had just heard at this very moment what he clearly recognized as a rifle shot, who held Kennedy's hand and led him into the killing zone. John Connally, the Democratic governor of Texas. But Nixon wasn't a powerful devil in 1963. In fact, he had quit politics completely after losing the election in 1960 to Kennedy and then losing the election for governor of California in '62. So he was taking orders in 1963, the day Kennedy was shot, from much bigger devils. Can we name them? We need a little bit of historical background to understand who these really big devils are before going on. America is home to some of the most brutally vicious, racist monsters in all of history. American slave owners invented state-sponsored racism, and the wars of extermination against the first Americans killed a higher percentage of their race than Hitler's attempt to exterminate the Jews. It should come as no surprise, then, that the most powerful families in this country, the Fords, the Harrimans, the DuPonts, and especially the Rockefellers, supported racism, genocide, and Hitler from the very beginning. This is J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI for nearly 40 years. Since his death, he has been exposed as having been gay and a cross-dresser. He's been criticized for a long time for being a racist, but you have to admire his skills as an investigator. Hoover investigated the Nazi connections of all these people and brought actions against them. The Rockefellers and DuPonts were charged with secretly giving vital formulas for synthetic gasoline and synthetic rubber to the Germans during wartime. This was and is a huge deal. Without gasoline for their planes or rubber for the tires of their trucks, the Nazis absolutely could not have made war. This incredible destruction, an estimated 100 million people dead, would have been utterly impossible without the help of these American Nazis, the DuPonts and Rockefellers, who not only gave the German Nazis these vital formulas, they actually tried to hide these formulas from the United States. That bears repeating. These guys gave militarily vital formulas to the Nazis while they tried to hide these same vital secret formulas from the U.S. military. And Hoover caught them. Of course, they were never arrested, much less prosecuted. Their servants were hauled in front of Congress and called a lot of names and threatened with prison, and then everybody went back to the business of making millions of dollars off the war. But the details are absolutely fascinating, and we'll take a minute to look at one case. Hoover also investigated the Nazi connections of Union Bank of New York, and in 1942, the year the U.S. entered the war, the bank was seized as a Nazi asset. Prescott Bush, the president's grandfather, was the director and chief executive officer of that bank. And when the U.S. government grabbed the bank, he protested. He said, "Wait a minute, that's my bank." Hoover said, "That's right, no mistake. You're a Nazi, you run a Nazi bank." Now, let's not exaggerate. You run a bank for the Nazis. They tell you what to do, you do it. Does that make you a Nazi, just because you follow their orders? Well, yes, it kind of does, doesn't it? And besides, Prescott didn't live in Germany, he lived in America. He had a choice. There were lots of other jobs and other people he could have worked for. He freely chose to work for these guys. But maybe the Germans he was working for were just opportunistic businessmen, you know, just out to make a buck. Well, no doubt they were out to make a buck. But the principal German business partner in the Union Bank was the most infamous Nazi financier, Fritz Thyssen, an early, enthusiastic, and vitally important supporter of Hitler, providing key money in the earliest days of the party. He is probably the most important financial supporter of Hitler's that we know about. But the Bush family didn't need Germans to teach them about racism. The Bushes are descended from slave owners, for crying out loud. And they were enormously active in the eugenics movement in this country, trying to keep the undesirable dirty races out of America, like the Irish, the Chinese, the Italians, and the Jews. No, Prescott comes from a long and proud line of vicious racists. So Hoover knew what he was talking about. Prescott Bush was a Nazi's Nazi. This is going to be extremely important later, so please make a note to yourself. Hoover knew that the Bushes